Hi, Annabelle.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Awesome. So Charlotte has been looking at a bunch of ways to kind of serve its underserved community in housing and education. You're here to talk about the social impact of art.
Right.
Talk to me about the Jail Arts Initiative and kind of what drew you to that program.
Okay, so I'm a social practice artist. Can you hear me? And I approached the Beckler Museum because the jail program there was lacking in art programs for Latino inmates, and so we designed a program together, and we've been doing it for the last 5 years. And I go in there and I teach art to Latino inmates, and now I'm also branching out into other adult populations. And we go in there and we make art together for, you know, a period of 10 times, there are 10 sessions, 2 hours each, and we do it through a 10-week period. And so we can, you know, the artwork is based upon what's in the Beckler collection, and currently I'm working on, we're working on a project with Miro, and I can continue telling you. I chose a special series of Miro's works. One is called Ladder of Escape, because it talks about sort of the idea of having your feet on the ground, but also reaching up through creativity to other worlds and reflecting on them and coming back down and having sort of that ability to sort of handle the real situation through the creative ladder.
So
and the second,
yeah. No, I was going to say, talk a little bit more about the structure of the program.
So then it's a maximum security prison. So you know, before I even go in there, we have to have everything approved, all the different tools and things and supplies. I submit a curriculum that I work out with the Beckler Museum. And then I go in there and I have to go through a background check, et cetera. And the inmates the inmates choose to take the class. In other words, when the class is available, they go in and they ask a number of inmates, you know, who would like to take the class. And so, that's how the class is formed. We get about 10 to 15 folks. And we go into this room, the door closes, and we stay there for 2 hours. We don't leave, no liquids, everything is counted. And also, you know, the tools are very minimal too. We can use just a few different tools. And we get to play music, which is very rare, and they get to sort of interact with one another. So it's really, it provides a free space for them to, you know, think about life, reflect on their issues through the visual art making.
So what you're saying is that they're kind of using the inspiration from the artists that you choose to kind of interpret that work about their own lives, using their own narratives.
Exactly, perfect.
Awesome. Well, we're going to actually get to take a look at some of their pieces. Talk to me about this piece and kind of were your students naturally artistic?
So this is very interesting. So I walk in there and I say, okay, how many of you have made art? And so slowly I see people sort of slipping things out of their little notebooks. And apparently you can, it's very limited, there's no color allowed or anything. Apparently you can make art on envelopes. So I said, well, how did you get that color? You're not allowed to take any of these, you know, paints and stuff with you. And they say, aha, well, what I've done is I've taken Skittles, soap, a chicken bone, and Kool-Aid, and coffee grains. And through all these 5 different ingredients, they've created these colors. The green was done in class because you see there's a little green there, but I gave him a pencil and he was able to do that. So they are able to then, I mean, not this particular one, but in general, they can take these envelopes and they can actually make themselves visible because they are in this sort of state of invisibility, you know, locked up. This is one way that they can make themselves visible by taking these envelopes and mailing something to their friends and family. So this was really interesting that they had found their own way of making art. So there you go. There's that art that's in that jail somewhere in spite of me. I just come in and allow them to use more tools and have some fun with them.
And so this is one of the pieces that you use as inspiration for your students. Why did you think this particular piece would speak to them?
Well, because this is Miro's Hope of the Condemned Man, and he's done a whole series of these works. I figured that this kind of topic could sort of be, you know, could relate to their own situation, given that they're incarcerated, they're condemned in some way. And so I tested it. And so I put it up on the monitor, and we had a discussion about that, and they really responded to it and gave me a few interpretations about what they thought this piece meant in terms of, first of all, what they saw, and then later on they were able to create their own version of this. So we kind of worked both ways. So there's just a lot of, it's open to interpretation, which is really, so we sit around as a class and they give me interpretations of this piece. And yeah. And so then this is a piece that was done by one of the participants in these art workshops. And given that they're Latinos, most of them undocumented, so they're in for that and possibly other things. We don't discuss that too much. But here, you have this flag, which is a Bolivian flag, and then they're just kind of creating another version of this. And the lines are sort of the body that's incarcerated, sort of that space, and then the dots are the body, in other words. So they're incarcerated, they're sort of, in this case, he said he was dying, and in the third, he was, going to some other place. So it was a little bit grim, actually.
You mentioned that many of your students, excuse me, are undocumented. How does that kind of influence the way that they express themselves through art? You mentioned that this is influenced on a Bolivian flag.
Right.
How do you kind of see their status as undocumented?
Well, that's why I also picked Miró, because he in some way was Catalan in Spain and sort of had that sort of dual relationship and struggles with his identity. And so that sort of they struggle with their identity. And, they're given even less rights because they're undocumented. So they don't even have rights that, a regular sort of legal person has. So they're starting from even a lower level. And so this space that they have, they're given some freedom to sort of just exercise whatever they would like to do visually about themselves, about their lives. And I see it as a really important program. Yeah.
So you talked earlier about Miro's ladder of escape and the recurring motif of escape in some of the students' work.
Right.
I imagine that this creates a sense of community between the inmates that might not otherwise be able to foster that. Right. Are there times when the jail kind of encroaches, when they possibly can't use art as kind of the escapism that they might want to? Is there a way that being in a jail kind of impacts the way that they look at art?
Well, yeah, this is the only, if I understand your question correctly, this is the only space where they can sort of talk freely, listen to music, and express some of their feelings. They don't really have those moments where other moments where they can do that. So they have 2 hours in a 10-week period to do this, and then I leave. This is just an example of, actually this artist called it, "There are no chains around love and dreams." And I see that, this particular participant was really sort of exploring the idea quite in depth. And the pencil just sort of, with the pencil you see some of the details. I thought it was, had a lot of impact. Yeah.
Absolutely. So here's one of the inspiration art called the Nanas.
Yeah, so this is based on a series by Nikki de Sanfal. I mentioned Miró, but another artist, her name is Nikki de Sanfal, and she has a series of Nana figures, which in French means chick, sort of strong, powerful woman. And the strong, powerful woman is expressed in her physicality. And so I approached females and males and asked them if they, to think about sort of whether they wanted to impersonate themselves as a powerful woman or create a powerful woman, in their lives. And so that last one was done with paper mache. She's a mosaic artist, so of course I can't bring in bricks and whatever. So I took tissued paper and broke it up, and that was the kind of motif that we used instead of the mosaic. And so they created that, and that was a woman holding a child and sort of escaping through taking the balloon as a means of escape. This was done an iteration of that, where you take the drawing or the collage and you put under a piece of glass, and then you do a painted version of that. So you just basically paint over on this glass, put a piece of paper on it, and create a monoprint. So there are different iterations that they can create, from this particular topic of the Nana.
As you're watching your students kind of interpret their lives in the works of these artists, what are you learning from them about art as you're kind of participating in the process with them?
Well, first of all, when they pulled out all the artwork that they were doing, I realized that I was there for a reason. Art was in the in the minds and bodies of some of these folks. And this was just, I was convinced that, you know, giving them some more materials to work with and more concepts and ways of, you know, reflecting on things and using visual medium was a good thing to do. It seemed like it was going to be a helpful thing for them.
Absolutely. And so this is just a picture of your students.
Since it's maximum security and you can't take photographs, we created this little piece where they are all, of course, covering their faces with them working on their art. This is just a sort of self-representation. The art becomes a way for them to represent themselves instead of, you know what people see in the public sphere are these mugshots. And so this is another, we're creating other forms of finding ways that they can represent themselves. And in the, currently at the Beckler Museum, there's a show of female nanas and their poetry. So we're trying to get it out more into the public so that they can see, you know, what's really happening in the jail, you know, what can happen, what, you know, the things are going on that are things that they're learning skills through these processes of art.
And so I quickly just wanted to kind of take a step back as we talk about kind of social mobility in Charlotte. There's a lot of ways that we've talked about achieving that through education, through criminal justice reform. What place do you think that art plays in kind of developing social mobility for these underserved communities?
Yeah, so I see art, it's sort of like if you were look at the prison industrial complex, I see it as, you know, sort of before going into some sort of that complex, then, you know, once you're in the prison, then you're sort of, you know, afterwards you're, you know, you leave the prison and then you think beyond the prison, like abolition or something of that nature. So it's these different phases, and the power of art plays a role in all of these different phases. And so I've done before, which right now I'm working on a before project, which is teaching art and literacy to Latino families and their preschoolers. So I'm teaching them art through literacy. I mean, literacy through art, but I'm also teaching the families how to teach their young ones, to encourage them to learn, and visual art plays a large role in that.
Absolutely. You mentioned literacy, and I know that you have a poem that you'd like to read that one of your students wrote, and then we're going to go to questions quickly right after you read that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, I'm working on this Charlotte Arts and Mobility Project because, as we know, you know, just given the current situation, I feel like art can really contribute to upward mobility, and so we're working on a project that is addressing that. Okay, so this is the poem. Okay, and so the way it works is that in addition to making artworks, we create poems. And it's really important to create the poems because oftentimes if you just looked at the artwork, you wouldn't necessarily know that a lot of these people are incarcerated. But when you read the poems and you see them together, then it just kind of deepens your understanding of everything. Okay, I am humble and original. I wonder why there is so much wrong. I hear the wind. I see heaven. I want to express what I feel. I am a foreigner and a poet. I pretend to fly like a kite. I feel I am falling into an abyss. I touch hearts like all human beings. I worry that I am not the same. I cry because I am not the same man. I am my future and present. I understand my past brought me to this place. I say what is done will come around. I dream of light. I try to see life differently. I hope someday sadness will not exist. I am impatient and homosexual. So, okay.
It was very impactful. Well, Annabel, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay.